So do you really take your troubles with you wherever you go, right? I think if you go somewhere and your troubles don't go with you, then maybe it's not about you, right? So some troubles you do carry with you, but a lot of troubles you don't carry with you, right? So sometimes troubles are situational. For example, living in Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York City or Washington, D.C. is going to be much higher stress than living in Sydney or Brisbane or Perth, right? So wherever you go, there you are, is partly right and partly wrong, right? You're going to be a different person in different places. Now, if you're an alcoholic or, a chronic debtor or spender, yeah, those problems are going to go with you. But you can move somewhere and start sleeping better. You might have more friends. You might make more money. You might thrive. So we're profoundly affected by the company we keep, situations we place ourselves in, the jobs we take, the education we get. It's not just all about us and our internal state. So I am in Sydney, Australia right now, heading towards Clovelly Beach. And all the problems that I had in Los Angeles, I've left behind, or almost all of them. I feel free of anything that was bothering me back in California. And it's nice, right? When I read the LA Times, it's as though I'm reading about a foreign nation. So there's a different vibe here, right? So any tension about crime, any tension about not having health insurance, tension about dealing with the homeless, crazy drug addicts, you don't have that in Australia. Now, I have certain predispositions towards lack of conscientiousness, to a certain amount of carelessness. Right, those predispositions are still with me. Sorry. A certain lack of sensitivity, yeah, that's still with me. Certain predispositions towards selfishness, that's still with me. But you'll only know if you move, right? You'll only know which problems are just eternally you if you get up, get out, and move. Just go on a lengthy vacation. So that's the great thing about going on a vacation. You get to reset yourself. Just like when your computer's not working too well, you restart it. So you can restart yourself. Think how good your computer runs after you shut everything down and restart it. Well, I think the same can go for us. and just press reset on your system. So every day is a good day in Australia. Right, you might think you're an introvert, but get yourself into certain situations, you might realize how extroverted you can be. You might think you're neurotic, get yourself in a more relaxed environment, and might not be so neurotic anymore. Afraid of trying new things. And once you get into safety, you may not be as scared to try new things. Suffer from lack of conscientiousness. Well, might find if you improve your relations with other people, feel more at ease in the world, feel happier, might enjoy substantial increase in conscientiousness. So many traits that we think, oh, that's just who I am. Not necessarily. G'day mate, 40 here. So I was plugging in my iPhone to power it up, plugging it straight into my laptop and using, is there a C thing? That's where I plug my tech, my new stream cam into. Is there like a C thing you plug into? Anyway, when I plugged in my phone to power it up, and we're looking across here to Bondi Beach, plugged in my phone to power it up, like it killed my internet. Just killed the internet for everyone where I'm staying. And I didn't know that. It took me a day or two to figure it out. So when I lost my internet, I immediately started plugging and unplugging. In the course of plugging and unplugging, you can imagine what happened. I didn't plug the plugs in correctly. And so I created a problem for everyone else. So in my anxiety about technology, I made life worse for everyone else. So I don't know about you, but when I have clarity, that makes everything so much better. And when I don't have clarity, it just drives me mad. So I need a name for things. I need it like a diagnosis. I need an explanation. Oh, mate, I can really lose my cool. So there's a spiritual lesson here. Just thinking about patience, all right? I'm not a very patient person. And I've come to realize that patience, like a whole lot of virtues, is really only possible indirectly, all right? It's not really possible directly. And so I can try to work on my patience, and it does absolutely no good. And I find that with a whole bunch of other moral issues. Like, if I work on my patience, it's like trying to stretch a tight muscle. Like, a lot of people are into stretching and chiropractic adjustment, and it doesn't really work, because if the muscle's tight and in spasm, it pulls back into place. And so you stretch and stretch a tight muscle, and it's going to pop. Right? You can't get very far. And if you simply adjust your musculature, all right, then the muscle spasms are going to pull the musculature out of alignment. That's why a chiropractic adjustment only seems to provide benefit for a few hours or a day, because you haven't addressed the muscular spasm. But when you release the muscular spasm, then the body comes much more into alignment. Everything works much better. So too with patience, like, you can try to, I find you try to develop patience, it just doesn't work. It's like trying to stretch that tight muscle. But what does work is like a change in mindset. So if you go to like a silent retreat, you come back, it's a lot easier to be present and patient. And so when I'm hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, right? I don't tend to be so good with the old patience and consideration and courtesy and decency and empathy. Like, all these virtues aren't nearly as accessible to me when I'm hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. So like direct working on these particular character virtues doesn't really work for me. So watching out for being hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, and then indirect approaches such as a whole new relationship with God. So I believed in God pretty much my whole life, but I needed God with skin on it. Like, I needed to hear how people with my problem could find access to a higher power that enabled them to overcome this self-defeating compulsion that was also afflicting me. So God just didn't do it. I needed to be integrated into a community with steps and tools and a change in mindset, like a new pair of glasses. That's what I needed. Because just working on patience, or working on not under-earning, or not debting, or not masturbating, or not looking at porn, or not acting out emotionally with my various compulsions, just didn't work. I needed a new pair of glasses, a change in mindset. It's just like releasing a tight muscle instead of trying to stretch it or trying to manipulate the bones. And the bones just pop back into place. And my character defects just pop back into place unless I can release the bad habits of character that have gotten me into trouble. Now, I believed in God my whole life and didn't do anything for my emotional compulsions. Didn't do anything for my addictions, really. So people often say, oh, I'm sober by the grace of God. But they believed in God prior, right? And they were still drunk and acting out. So God's not enough. You have to make the decision to abstain and integrate into a community where you learn from other people and you get access to a new way of living so that you're happy, joyous, and free, and therefore much less likely to be impatient. I don't know about you, but when I'm happy, joyous, and free, patience comes much more naturally to me. when I'm hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, patience comes less naturally to me. So anything I can do to be in a state of emotional equilibrium, to be in a state of emotional comfort. Look at all these helicopters. What's going on with the copters, mate? So many copters working out around Bondi. So anything I can do to be emotionally stable and calm and happy, that's going to work to the benefit of everyone who's around me. I need to get centered and at ease and in reality. So the more I can do to have an accurate understanding of reality, my place in reality, then the less likely I am to get into trouble and to act out and to be impatient and rude and lacking in empathy. So the more sophisticated my top-down models for how the world works, less likely I am to be impatient. And the more sophisticated my understanding of how I work bottom up, what's going on inside of me, right, the more likely I am to be rooted in reality and to be at ease and free, like a free muscle, a muscle spasm that's been released, right, then has much more flexibility, like a lot more room to deal with the ups and downs and the stresses of life. G'day mate, 40 here, looking at world famous Bondi Beach. So, one of the qualities of being a narcissist is that you want to attach to people you regard as powerful, so that you can get power by kind of attaching to them. And so I've always had a whole bunch of heroes and power figures. Always had people I looked up to, and not really understanding the dynamics of narcissism, but I was looking for power, right? I was looking for power by trying to connect with powerful people. The narcissist feels like if he can just connect himself to powerful people, then he'll be okay, then he'll have power, and people will respect him. Yeah, it's kind of creepy, but that's reality. Now, in my Dennis Prager stage, like I started listening to him in 1988 when I was at UCLA, I took many of his maxims seriously. I took him very seriously. I remember my stepmother once said, somebody should tell Dennis Prager that Luke will one day betray him like he does everybody else. And so Dennis would talk about, what a waste of time it is to watch TV. And so Dennis would suggest these various questions to ask women when you go on a date, such as like, how much TV do you watch? And so I would do this. Like, I took many of his prescriptions very seriously, and they were often terrible. So one of his prescriptions was, ask a woman on a date how much TV she watches. So I met this very spicy Persian, like very sarcastic. Right? I love sarcastic women. Most women aren't really into sarcasm. But thank God she was. And she was adorable. She was so cute and so smart and so fast with her wit. And so I was chatting with her one evening. So like a good Dennis Prager acolyte, I asked her, how much TV do you watch a day? She said, 8 hours. I realized now she was just being sarcastic. She was just like teasing me. And I took it seriously. It's like, I can't date someone like this. It's ridiculous. Like, she was an absolutely adorable woman. And I took Dennis Prager a little too seriously. And I forgot that most people don't really mean what they say. And she was just teasing me, but I took it literally because I was so lazy. I couldn't handle nuance. I was so insecure. Couldn't handle nuance. And so to deal with a complicated world, I would, try to apply the maxims of Dennis Prager. Like I saw he's got a successful life. If I adopt the practices and attitudes of Dennis Prager, then I'll be successful too. And it didn't work out that way. Like, many of his maxims were just terrible, because people usually don't mean what they say. People almost never mean what they say. So Dennis also recommends that when you've got problems in a relationship, you should write them out and send them in an email. Like, for me, it is terrible advice. This has never worked out. Always just made things worse. But when you're inflexible, when you're narcissistic, when you're looking for power, right? Trying to attach yourself to power. Here's a powerful, influential person. I want to be like this person. Let me follow in his footsteps. Let me practice his maxims. Let me do what he says so that I can be like him. And kind of have a rule book for life. And then apply it inflexibly to people, forgetting that people almost never mean what they say. Surprise, surprise, doesn't tend to work out very well. Ah, mate, let the healing begin. Right? Think wherever you go, there you are. Nothing changes. Well, put yourself here, mate. Let the healing begin. Right? Get out there into nature. It's just like a reset on your system, mate. Everything starts working better. You start working better. Like your psyche starts working better. Your central nervous system calms down. It's like when you're in an area with really good Wi-Fi, really fast internet connection, right? You just zip around. All those negative eons coming off the ocean, mate. Magnificent view. I'm on my way to Watson's Bay. We used to have guns, big cannons, protecting the entrance to the Sydney Harbour. So there's some truth that wherever you go, there you are. It's only half true. Right? Imagine you're in a place like this, mate. You don't think you'd find this refreshing? You don't think you'd take on a new attitude towards life? You don't think you'd be a little more easygoing when everyone around you is relaxed and easygoing? You don't think that has an effect on you? Of course it does. Recalibrates your system. Being on holiday, having no obligations, no pressing financial or personal or religious or moral concerns, social demands, just you exploring Sydney Harbour with your mates online. My dad would always get refreshed swimming in the ocean. Never slept better than when he was staying by the sea. Sleeping pretty well myself. Enjoying 10 miles a day of hiking. Nice brisk swim. Oh, is this the end of the road? That sucks. I want to get over there, mate, to Watson's Bay. That's the entrance to Sydney Harbour. What a magnificent sight. $40 here. I'm using my super cheap Aussie phone. So tell me how much you hate it. Like, definitely inferior video and audio quality compared to my iPhone with the Shure mic. But I get 80 gigs of data on this plan, on my Australian plan, my Australian phone, 80 gigs of data for 40 bucks. While on my iPhone, I can only buy 15 gigs of data for 50 bucks. Whoa! 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 See those porpoises? Now I wish I had my iPhone. My God. Wow. Wow. That's spectacular. That's amazing. Wow. That's amazing stuff. How do I turn face tracking off? I've got another device out here trying to figure out how to turn the face tracking off. Oh, the gorgeous day here. Just, is that porpoises that were frolicking? Those whales. Okay, how much do you hate the inferior quality with my cheap Aussie phone here? And cheap quality audio. So, we're looking over here, G, and to the left will be Clovelly. My God, those dolphins, dolphins or sharks or whatever they were jumping around were just amazing. Anyway, what do we want to say about the election? No red wave outside of Florida. Okay, looks and sounds okay. But good night for Ron DeSantis. He exceeded expectations. Bad night for Donald Trump. Like many of the people that he picked didn't do so well. A lot of poor quality candidates. And abortion seemed to really hurt the Republicans. So, Rick Caruso could be the next mayor of Los Angeles. He's centrist, center-right. He would be certainly my choice over Karen Bass, who's the very left-wing black female Democrat who's running against him. So Caruso's currently holding a slim lead. Overall, poor performance from Republicans, much below what was expected. So I think this is primarily to do with the abortion issue, and then secondarily to do with America becoming much more polarized. So fewer votes are up for grabs. Third thing has to do with poor candidate quality on the part of the Republicans, largely due to Donald Trump. Fourth thing is I don't think Americans like Donald Trump. And to the extent that Donald Trump is lurking in the background for Republicans, I don't think Americans like that. So Kerry Lake was running for governor. So normally for governor, you primarily want competence. You don't necessarily want ideology. And someone just fell off the side here. Someone just fell off the side here a year ago, taking a selfie with his girlfriend. Fell 30 feet to his death. So why was Florida so strong? Is it because Republicans have been moving to Florida? And that's why Ron DeSantis did better than expected. But Ron DeSantis went way up in the betting markets. Donald Trump plunged overnight due to the election results. It still looks like Republicans will win the House. Kerry Lake is sharp. Watch as she becomes a superstar. Yeah, she is sharp. But I think in governor's races, people primarily want competence, less than ideology. So John Fetterman won. John Fetterman certainly wasn't sharp. So maybe people don't care about debate performance so much. It's time to buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin is in free fall. So why are all these tweets out there saying that people who promote Bitcoin should go to prison? All right, I don't get that. All right, why should one have to foresee every possible danger with anything you endorse? Like, why is it the responsibility of pitchmen to thoroughly and comprehensively study any product that they're pitching? Right, they're just getting paid to perform. They're actors, or they're famous people selling a little bit of their fame in exchange for money. But no, I don't think people who endorse Bitcoin or famous people who pitch Bitcoin to go to prison. I don't even understand the mindset that says these people who endorse Bitcoin should go to prison. It's not the pitchman's responsibility. So I came out very strongly against Bitcoin about 2 years ago. So only 2 years ago did I start reading up on it. And I read about 5 in-depth articles on it, became an expert. But after I looked into it, I just don't see problems that Bitcoin effectively solves unless you're a criminal. So what's going to come out of this election? Kerry Lake has just started, time will tell, but she is ex-media, she knows the game. Yeah, she is very effective with the media sound bites. Sounds like she'll be Donald Trump's running mate. But as times become more serious, maybe people will put a higher premium on competence rather than sharp sound bites. So that overhanging rock, I saw this Sheila who just climbing out there on that overhanging rock. She went over the fence yesterday. I did not join her. I think crime will remain a winning issue for Republicans. And so they spent probably 5 times as much on crime in Pennsylvania as they did on inflation ads, which is good because Republicans don't really have a plan for dealing with inflation. and Republicans do have a plan for crime, it'll lock up the super predators. Like, why is it so safe in Sydney, and why is it so unsafe in Los Angeles, New York, Washington, D.C.? It's because of the super predators. Right? If you just lock up that 1% of the population commits vast amounts of crime, you can have safe cities again. So, time to lock up the super predators. That's just basic, blunt Republican crime platform there. Lock up the super predators, and Los Angeles would become a safe city again. Lock them up, keep them locked up until at least past age 40. Because if you let them out under age 40, more likely than not, they will re-offend within 3 months. Re-offend in the sense of getting caught. Right? How much offending are they doing without getting caught? So almost no homeless here in Sydney. So I think part of that is the difference in the American ethos of freedom versus the Australian ethos of fairness. So from an Aussie perspective, it's just not fair. People go homeless. Australians are willing to sacrifice freedom for more fairness. But there's more of a sense of collective responsibility. There's more of a communal sense in Australia. While in America, it's much more about individual freedom. Because the United States emerged out of the pre-Enlightenment. And then the post-Enlightenment, the Second British Empire, that gave birth to Australia and New Zealand, right, had much more of a sense that human beings were rational, were basically good, that you could plan a rational, cohesive, fair society, while the people who settled America came here primarily for freedom. Different understandings of freedom, whether they were Puritans or the Scots-Irish or the Quakers or the Cavaliers, but they were still all about the freedom. So one of the downsides of the tremendous freedom in America is all the homelessness and crime. Those are cockatoos, right? It's magnificent birds. America's always been a savage nation. Everyone has always fought each other. But even hard times, right now, yeah. So America has never been as homogeneous as Australia or England, let alone France or Germany, let alone Poland, let alone Japan, Korea, China. So I think Australians would be much more likely to institutionalize the mentally ill. Also, in Australia, marijuana is not legal. So I think for a significant number of people, marijuana acts as a gateway drug to harder drugs that fry their mind. And you can no longer safely do recreational drugs because of fentanyl. So many people taking cocaine or heroin laced with fentanyl and dropping dead. So the new meth and the new heroin is just frying people's brains, leading to astronomical rates of homelessness. So on Richard Spencer's show, they were talking about how capitalism is responsible for homelessness, but overwhelmingly, the homeless in America, more than 90% are alcoholics, drug addicts, and the mentally ill. Right? That's not capitalism's fault. Right? A large part of that is just drug and alcohol abuse. Now, why do people abuse drugs and alcohol, perhaps at a disproportionate rate in the United States? I think maybe it has to do with the downside of freedom, less sense of community. And so when people are free, they're free to do horrible things, not just good things. Oh, okay, marijuana is legal in the ACT now for small personal amounts. And that's brand new. But it's just huge in California. I mean, so many pot shops, like everyone's doing marijuana. I have not smelled marijuana since getting to Sydney 6 days ago. And I don't remember ever smelling marijuana in my 2 months here last year. So that's really nice. I haven't heard anyone talk about marijuana here because not nearly as big a deal, so people aren't frying their minds as likely on drugs. Also, I'm dealing with a really good class of people here in Sydney's eastern suburbs. Okay. Sit down when I pontificate. Pontificating's hard work, mate.
Hey, Richard.
Okay. So, I expected the Republicans to do better. I'll admit that. I was taken aback. So the pollsters had a pretty good night. Pollsters were basically right about these elections. Along with the pollsters, the media were pretty much right too. They were more skeptical of the red wave than Republican politicians. Republicans definitely hurt by Roe v. Wade. Republicans definitely hurt by the quality of their candidates. Crime, though, has to be a winning issue.
People are just coming in right now. Good.
So crime should be a winning issue for Republicans going forward, because Democrats can never be as law and order as Republicans. And Democrats run all the big cities, which are just crime-ridden.
So people are just coming in right now. Good.
So
Yeah, I don't know, but I think people have
Democrats just don't want to talk about crime. It's amazing. Going into the 1992 election, on the issue of crime, Republicans were up 14 points, but Bill Clinton turned it around so that Democrats were thought of as better dealing with issues of crime through the 1990s. And then, over the past 20 years, Republicans have generally been seen as better dealing with issues of crime by about 10 points. And now it's up to about 12 points. So
about what is going on yet. I'm just looking at
particularly strong issue for Republicans, and it should be going forward.
Really safe races. Chuck Schumer. My related question, but it's not directly about the results. Anyway, feel free to field it or not. But I saw you posted you posted an ad by that. I guess she's running for Congress. Whoa, sorry. Word call behind me. Sorry. What's going on?
So I subscribe to Richard Spencer's Ratings Journal Substack, and there's a lot of good content on here. You really get your $6 a month worth. I mean, particularly if you look at it for intellectual entertainment, right? You're not looking at it for, responsibility and truth, but someone who doesn't care about responsibility, just letting it all hang out with hot takes. Very entertaining.
So that woman who's running for Congress in Montana, and it was like about abortion, that campaign ad, and you just posted the link without any commentary, and I watched, it's 30 seconds, so I watched it, and I guess I didn't hate the ad, but I guess to me it almost reflected, I think, my and probably your kind of ambivalence about the issue, because here you have this white woman, very nice, pleasant, middle-aged woman, and then here she has her family, and I guess she has multiple, I forget how many daughters, and and the ad was not very aggressive, it wasn't like this, the really kind of obnoxious pro-choice stuff. It was very kind of calm, but basically saying that Zinke, or how you pronounce his name, is very anti. I don't know. So I guess to me it was you didn't really comment on it, and to me it was almost reflected well, these are the kind of people who you wouldn't want to have abortion.
I know, but it is ultimately a federal issue. I mean, I guess we could get in some comments where we're like, let's have you make abortion illegal in Montana, mandatory in Alabama or something. But
Wait, there's no inherent reason why abortion has to be a federal issue. In fact, that's the opposite of the intent of the founders. Most things should be left up to the states.
I don't think that's reasonable. And the other thing is that, I hate to sound like a shitlib here, but there are many other issues outside of just natural intelligence and race. And keep in mind that Monica Tranel has had 3 children, so she's doing fine. She's kept up her end of the bargain. The human race will survive. But I mean, there are serious issues with early prenatal testing in terms of Down syndrome, etc. that are.
Yeah, there are always other issues. Diesel and gas, the left have no more oil reserves to drain. So yeah, it's a good issue to go after the Democrats on. That the transition to green energy is much slower than the media portrays it. We've only been able to shift about 2% of our energy needs to green energy over the past 30 years. It's just a minuscule amount. And there's absolutely no evidence that green energy is going to be able to supply most of our energy needs for the next 30, 40 years. There's just absolutely no hope in sight. We're going to rely on fossil fuels for many decades to come. And it's kind of absurd to think otherwise. So what do you do when you've got an issue that you believe in strongly, but that polls really badly? So abortion, right? Many Republicans feel very strongly about abortion, but obviously it's a loser as a political issue. So there are a lot of things that we believe in
right now. Good.
very strongly, right? That we may not want to impose on other people, that we may not want to legislate, right? Just because you believe strongly in something doesn't mean you need to legislate it, doesn't mean you need to talk about it in your campaign or in your private life, right? Just because one feels strongly about something, nothing has to inherently follow from that, particularly with politics. So it sounds like it's very much going to be in Republicans' best interest going forward to play down the whole issue of abortion. Right? It doesn't have to be on your campaign website. It doesn't have to be in your speeches. All right? You don't have to try to legislate it. You can just say that morally you're opposed to it. Unless you're in an overwhelmingly conservative state. But Kansas is pretty conservative. And they voted strongly for abortion rights.
And the ad was not very aggressive. It wasn't like this, the really kind of obnoxious pro-choice stuff. It was very kind of calm, but, basically saying that Zinke, or however you pronounce his name, is, very anti. I don't know. So I guess to me it was, you didn't really comment on it. And to me it was almost reflected like, well, these are the kind of people who you wouldn't want to have abortion.
I know. But it is ultimately a federal issue. I mean, I guess we could get in some comments where we're like,
yeah, big win for Ukraine.
Make abortion illegal in Montana, like mandatory in Alabama.
But Republicans have been all over the place with regard to Ukraine. Many Republicans have criticized the Biden administration for not doing enough with regard to Ukraine, that we have to get tougher, we have to send them, bigger, stronger, meaner weapons.
But I just don't think that's reasonable. And the other thing is that, like, I hate to sound like a shitlib here, but there are many other issues outside of just like natural intelligence and race. And keep in mind that Monica Tranel has had 3 children, so she's doing fine. She's kept up her end of the bargain. The human race will survive. But I mean, there are serious issues with like early prenatal testing in terms of Down syndrome, etc., that are utilized by all sorts of people. It's not necessarily eugenic, but it seems it might be kind of eugenic on a second order. It's like the amount of time you're going to invest in a child who has no future. I mean, that's really not acceptable. And there are, a lot of these edge cases, granted they're edge cases, but that doesn't mean they're less real, of, women where the fetus is barely alive and is, can't survive much longer, and they can't be aborted because they're in the 3rd trimester, and this woman is like endangering her life due to this. I mean, these are granted pretty rare, but they're nevertheless real, and I think we should be serious about these things.
I wasn't really meaning that as a criticism. I just thought the ad itself was kind of odd, because it was almost like a very wholesome ad,
right.
But it's about this very, a lot of the abortion people are just pretty disgusting in terms of how they, and I agree, the Republican stance, like
Sarah Silverman or something, where she's like, I had an abortion and I loved it, or something like that.
Yeah,
I agree. That's
kind of incongruous, the ad. It was, anyway, just how it almost like a Republican ad, the way that she was showing off her family and stuff. But another thing about the exceptions that they always talk about: incest, rape, life of the mother. Well, it's like,
Yeah, overall, there's no substantial difference on Ukraine between Republicans and the Democrats. There is with some Republican commentators like Tucker Carlson. But the rank and file Republican politicians are just as supportive of Ukraine as the Democrats.
Was unfortunately, that's like we're all like products of rape. So like in the evolutionary past, I mean, like,
that's an interesting point. We're all products of rape in the evolutionary past. So how many generations back do you have to go in your family? Russia should be looking east, not west. Only a matter of time before China takes Siberia back. Ukraine war equals very low IQ, says the chat. But yeah, how many generations back do you have to go until you are a product of rape? Right. So I'm not aware of any raping ancestors in my line, but of course there had to be. And so we have these basic instincts that are frequently not very nice. That's why I don't agree with the Enlightenment view that human beings are basically good. I mean, men are basically rapists. If they can get away with it, they frequently do. And we are all products of rape. We have that in our DNA. Good point.
Not like people make it sound like this is like a like a minor thing, but it's like that does happen, and it happened a lot more in the past. So I mean, to me, to me, it's like it should be mandatory if get rid of those genes. But anyway, that's a separate thing. Anyway,
well, I mean, just because we are going to change. I mean, it is very true that what you're saying, which is that rape.
And you can't get rid of those genes, all right? Because sex is inherently a violent act, right? It requires aggression. The man has to penetrate the woman. And so ideally you want the violence confined within marriage, but the level of violence that it takes to conquer a woman, right? That level of aggression, absolutely essential for men. Now you want it channeled in pro-social directions, but you can't eliminate those genes.
Was ubiquitous, and that there's no question we are all kind of a product of rape on some level. I mean, what you were saying is factually undeniable, but we're not living in the ancient world anymore, or the Middle Ages.
Yeah, I mean, it is fortunately it is much less common that people are it's more in the generations back. But I'm just saying that the Republican types, they make it sound like it's it's like this total fringe thing when it's unfortunately not.
That is pretty dishonest. Yeah, I agree. The other thing, like just talking in terms of like pragmatic things, I mean, how do you prove that you've been raped? Like, let's say this like white girl is raped by some black or something, like, and she goes to have an abortion in Texas, and how does she prove that? Are they just taking her word for it? I mean, I think it's fairly unclear, actually.
It's not to defend those laws, not to defend these draconian laws, but as I recall, when these laws were enacted, the provision would say that there has to be a police report, essentially, and the police report has to have been filed within a certain number of days of the rape's occurrence. That's how.
So you don't need a conviction or something. That could take years.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Okay. Well, I guess that is fairly reasonable. I'm glad you all added that. But there are some weird situations. I mean, what about a preteen who's raped by an uncle or her father? It's a horrifying situation like that. That is not, unfortunately, that is not as rare as it should be. I mean, that's a real thing. And are you going to file a police report on your horrible father? I mean, I don't know. It's horrible. I also.
Yeah, but if you're not willing to file a police report, then maybe there should be some privileges that don't go to you. All right. So many people say horrible things happen to them, but they never bothered to file a police report. So it's a lot harder to take allegations seriously when people don't bother to file a police report.
I mean, my grandfather was a radiologist actually in Louisiana, but he went to medical school and he was interning in a Catholic hospital. And it just shows kind of how, in a way, reasonable people used to be. He knew a doctor who told him this when he was doing gynecology or OBGYN, whatever it is. And he basically, when a child that would be born that could not survive, the physician would ask the nuns present to go eat lunch or something like that, and he would euthanize the baby. And it was a mercy killing.
So my mother, she was killed by an overdose of morphine. My mother was dying very slowly, painfully of bone cancer. She got down to about 50 pounds. She was 5 feet tall and 50 pounds. And eventually, something around April 28th of 1970, the doctors thought she'd suffered enough, just gave her an excess of morphine, and it killed her. So I find it hard to get upset about that. I mean, she was in pain. She was in a horrible way, and just gave her a little bit of morphine, a little bit too much. And Richard talks about his grandmother said that she didn't want to be on life support, hooked up to life support for years. So I'm not sure if they have a right to die in New South Wales, but it was a big political campaign, and I believe it passed. And fundamentally, that people have the right to die, and they can contract with a doctor to kill them. And this is fairly common in many parts of the Western world.
But is he doing the wrong thing? Like, maybe the parents should be involved with that or so on. I get it, but there was just a certain kind of like realism that I think was present among previous generations. And the kind of unrealism that's present among current pro-lifers, I think, is out of control. I mean, one pretty formative thing in my life was something that I don't know if you guys remember or have heard of, but the Terry Schiavo affair from 2000.
So why has the abortion issue become so unreasonable? Because it's become a holy issue. It's become a moral issue. It's much harder to compromise on a moral issue than a pragmatic political issue. And it's become a holy and a moral issue in America because it's a proxy for race. It's a proxy for all sorts of perspectives. It unites basically everyone right of center, right? Catholics, evangelical Christians, trads who aren't Christian can all unite behind a common opposition to abortion. So abortion is not really about abortion in America. It's a proxy for attitudes towards race and sexuality and mores.
I think it might be 2005. It was after Bush was reelected. Yeah, there was a woman who was her life was being maintained purely through technology for I think a decade or something like this. I mean, she was brain dead, and her husband, who I believe had like remarried, and I think that added a little like twist to the whole thing. I can correct me if I'm wrong on this stuff, but
He wanted to marry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, he had taken up a relationship with another woman, and they had some kids together.
Okay, but still, like pretty normal, like understandable and reasonable stuff. And I mean, just the idea that you want to go die on that hill, so to speak, of like maintaining the life of someone who is has no rational faculty or consciousness whatsoever is just
right. You'd have to have a faith statement that you need to maintain the life of someone who's brain dead, who's hooked up to machines. Right? That's a faith statement, and it's hard to argue over a faith statement. Right? When I encounter someone who's making their position just on the basis of a leap of faith, then like you can't argue with that. There's nowhere to go in that discussion. So when these issues become moralized and rendered holy and separate from the messy world of daily politics, then they become less and less solvable.
absolutely grotesque, in my opinion. And it's in no way trad or whatever, because she's being maintained through advanced medical technology. And
wasn't the argument that she still communicates with me and she is kind of still there? Wasn't that like one side of it?
I don't think Terry Schiavo was communicating with anyone.
There was
she did
one
have a
side.
pulse.
There were family members that thought that were feeding.
Well, if someone groans or raises up for a moment, that is something.
So Milo Yiannopoulos is going on Tim Pool's show saying people want to see blood. Does he mean that in terms of civil war? Milo is a very dramatic fellow. He's into excitement and thrills. I can't take his Christianity seriously until he makes amends to all the people that he needlessly and gratuitously hurt. Like, he was nasty unnecessarily to a lot of people. Just check out Lauren Southern's video. So Milo Yiannopoulos, like Nick Fuentes, strikes me as someone who's just using Christianity for instrumental reasons. Who cares what Milo Yiannopoulos says? Well, he was the leading right-wing entrepreneur for about 2 years running up to the 2016 election. So he's played a significant role in this country's political history. He had outsized influence. Very talented, charismatic man.
They're alive or consciousness, and there's no hope. I mean, there's got to be mercy killings in this situation. I mean, it's just everyone throughout world history was based on the subject.
So who's getting back on Twitter? Have you noticed that? Because Elon Musk started allowing some of these old diehards back on Twitter.
Yeah, I was just trying to remember like both sides of it.
What's so painful listening to the pro-choice is that it's not so much the outcome, which I think we sort of all, whether begrudgingly or sort of forthrightly agree with, but it's just their snide cynicism and nihilism, like the ridiculously stupid arguments they present about how it's not alive. Like, I have so much more respect for all these blue-haired cunts. If they just said, yes, it is a child and we have the right to kill it, I would gladly agree with them in the sense that there is some sort of natural right. But the fact that they're like arguing there's like a blob of cells and other ridiculous shit, it's just,
I agree. I think
it's very
that's
painful.
because they're.
Well, it's really hard to determine when does life begin. I mean, you can understand that there can be various faith positions on that, and different people can come to to different positions. Man, a lot of helicopters out. So I believe that the generic Judaism position is that life begins when it's viable. So not a lot of rabbis would hold that life begins at conception in the same way. It's the same quality of life as someone who's already born.
Trying to like rationalize away something, and it's like there is a spark of life, when the sperm hits the egg. There's something. So let's not like totally lie about this. I totally agree. It's a life form, but it's not really a citizen. I think that's the distinction. That it's not really. It's not a citizen. That's the distinction.
So yeah, Dennis Prager made a good point. The question isn't so much when does life begin, but when should the right to life begin?
I would think, and then also there's just a kind of pragmatic realism of like some bad things happen. I think 1 in 5 pregnancies result in miscarriages. So miscarriages are common, and there's the issue of Down syndrome and other mal effects like that. And then there are just these granted edge cases, but when we're talking about an edge case, it's not really like being struck by lightning. It's much more common than 1 in a million or whatever that is. These really serious issues where again, these are reported out in Nature publications. I don't think they're lying. There are women whose child can't make it and is now in her stomach, but she can live. It's not a direct threat to her life, but there's a possibility for becoming septic or something. It's just guys, seriously, this situation is bad enough. Let's, you have to allow people to.
I feel like the average IQ of the Richard Spencer participant in these group calls on his Radix Journal Substack is probably pretty high, around 120. A lot of good quality conversations.
Terminate the pregnancy and just kind of move on with their life. They can have another child. You've got to just not be this obsessed with this issue and just black and white moralism.
Yeah, it's from on a level of like grad school debate in a sense. The pro-life side, it's almost always presented in these sweeping philosophical abstract.
Well, saying that people should not be obsessed with this or that. Republicans haven't run in part on abortion because it doesn't work. It has worked to unite large parts of their base. Now, overall, abortion is much more of a winning issue for Democrats than for Republicans. But to win the Republican nomination, Republicans have increasingly found absolutely necessary to be pro-life.
Or in these saccharine terms of we love the babies and so forth. They never do want to get down to the nitty gritty in the way that we are in this conversation, talking about these cases, the real impacts these things have on women's health, the real difficulties these laws cause in the world that we're living in. Just want to make it again, sorry.
Yeah. Well, look, I think I mentioned this on one of these calls a year and a half ago, but this was back in 2002 or 2003, some around that time. So I was a young man out of college, and my grandfather actually had died, and it was a quick and a good death. He was actually out hunting when he died. Perfect death for him in many ways because he loved hunting, bird hunting. And my grandmother really kind of fell off a cliff. She lost her husband. I noticed that. But anyway, we were in the hospital. I talked to my mom about this not too long ago, actually. But we were in the hospital, and she was really in a very serious situation, and she was being revived. And we did tell the nurses, we can't go on this. This is becoming grotesque. And again, according to pro-lifers, I'm a murderer. Give me a break. My grandmother, I loved her more than anything, and it was not actually even much of a moral dilemma for both her daughter and her grandson. We both, it was becoming sick, and it was just really not a choice. You have to kind of deal with really serious issues like this in life, and it doesn't mean that you're a bad, immoral person or something like this. I even remember specifically that my grandmother told me many times when I was a child, she knew someone who was kept on life support for 8 years or something. She would always tell me, Richard, just pull the plug. Don't make me go through that. It's a kind of torture. And she did tell me that specifically, but even if she had not, clearly we made the right decision. What, were we going to revive this woman in very bad health and keep her alive for 2 more days of consciousless existence? I'm not that cruel. So I just, when you've gone through something, and I even imagine a lot of pro-lifers have gone through a situation like that and don't think of themselves as murderers, but when they're given this dilemma, they kind of like to morally signal. But, you've got to be truthful and realistic about these matters.
It might mean you're a moral person because doing the right thing when it's hard.
Exactly. And Richard, to be honest, it wasn't that hard. This is horrible.
Yeah. Richard, do you remember what the other? I remember the Terry Shiloh thing was a really heated debate. What was the other side saying?
Well, they were making comments like what we made about how who knows, she might really be there or something. But they were mostly slippery slope arguments. The kind of this is going to bring about death panels, and soon we'll just be able to murder everyone who turns 50 or something. It's just.
Yeah, I think the conservative position is that there isn't such a sharp distinction between the fetus and the baby. Remember, the liberal position is that we're autonomous, buffered, strategic, rational, basically good individuals. The conservative position is that we're not buffered, that there isn't these clean-cut distinctions between fetus and baby, between brain dead and heart dead, that we're not buffered individuals, but that we're part of a community. And so that, what happens to someone who's brain dead and hooked up to life-saving technology, that still has an effect on the wider community. So it's the difference between the modern, liberal, buffered, strategic, autonomous self and the porous self of the traditionalist, who believes that we're affected by what's going on around us.
It's just ridiculous. Richard, by the way, remember our bet?
It's not ridiculous. It's just the difference between two different conceptions of self: a traditional medieval conception of self and a modern liberal Enlightenment conception of the self.
About whether Nick Fuentes was going to advocate voting Republican in the midterms?
Oh.
Yeah.
It was about the, hold on. Was it about the midterms or 2024?
Midterms.
Okay.
Whether he's,
Okay, I'll accept.
no, it was for $100. But I'm a man of my word. I'm a man of my word. I'll stick to it. Actually, no, I haven't been watching it. I'm going to do some research and I'm going to screen record it. So, yeah, I'll find out. But yeah, I can't stay on tonight. I just wanted to say that before. It's like,
You might be able to wiggle out of it because he'll say something like, don't.
So what's the philosophy of the hate watcher? Lawrence, I get you hate the show, you despise the show. So why do you even watch? Some people, watch shows that they absolutely hate. I never do this, so I don't quite understand the psychology or the thinking or the predisposition of people who watch shows that they loathe.
If Roy Loomer's on ballot, you will not love her.
Oh, no, see, the deal was, that would be you winning. The deal was, if he's advocating voting for Republican, we're all you win.
Okay, well, I picked that one.
All right, talk to you later, guys.
All right.
I'm a bit confused. What's the did he say that you said that Nick Fuentes wouldn't promote?
I think this came from like late 2020 or 2021. And basically, Dylan was like, oh, but I just listened to Nick Fuentes, and he's just so angry at the Republican Party, he hates them. And what I said is like, look, the rubber hits the road at some point. Like, he's going to tell you to go vote Republican shortly.
Yeah, that sounds like something you would say, so yeah.
Yeah. Much like with the whole Yang Gang phenomenon, or even I think I wasn't the only one to kind of flirt with Bidenism in some way, where it's like, well, who cares? What's the difference between Trump and Biden? Trump is not so bad. But again, it's like when the rubber hits the road, they're going to order you to vote for the GOP. All right, Ryan. Shit. Oh my God. In Ohio, okay, 43%. Ryan is up. Tim Ryan.
Yeah, well, J.D. Vance won fairly convincingly, by more than 4 percentage points in Ohio. No longer such a swing state, much more of a red state like Florida.
After they count day-out ballots. And early voting goes to the Democrats. So, wow, this is pretty interesting. Tim Ryan's up by 30,000 votes. Wow. Betterman is at 25. Holy shit. 18% reporting, and he's up 25. Oh my God, are we seeing a blue wave? I should have stuck with my prediction from 2 months ago. Wow, Warnock is up 4, but that's 62%. That's pretty high. That's like a real sample of stuff.
Hey, Richard, I was watching a little bit of Crystal and Sagar.
So, yeah, Richard says I should have gone with my gut. How often do we say that? Should have gone with my gut is always right. I think when Richard and when I say something like that, we all tend to have blinkered views. I guarantee you that my gut is not always right. I guarantee you that your gut is not always right. I guarantee you that Richard Spencer's gut is not always right. But we have such a blinkered understanding of both ourselves and others.
And according to Crystal, she was saying that the Democrats are going to end up doing really well because she had some behind-the-scenes data or something. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
Holy shit, I should have stuck with my fucking gut. Oh my God, I used my head to boost my gut. Oh my God, I was right.
I think Fetterman's going to win. Warnock's going to win. I'm really hoping Ryan wins. I'm afraid Lake will probably win in Arizona, that obnoxious woman. And let's not forget about Beto.
Would you not agree?
So ideally you want your head and your gut kind of lining up. All right? When it's your gut versus your head, you get torn up. So yeah, Lawrence Connor says, sometimes I'm interesting, but frequently I leave him uninspired.
Okay. Would you mind agree with me? With Kerry Lake?
Like 20 years ago.
I'm older. Are you older than me? I think.
No,
So yeah, Kerry Lake is an incredibly compelling, charismatic person. But the compelling and the charismatic don't necessarily make for more competent leaders, right? So people who are good on TV and snappy with the comebacks aren't necessarily more effective at governing.